Everyone good?
Oh, I don't have it open. Ready.
Cool. Chris, Eli, Lawrence. Okay. Assume all evidence for active clarity and problematic discourse. Agency begins with vulnerability towards the other. 3 warrants. First, take a full account of one's agency. It's possible my body has history. I can't recollect yet. It still grounds me. Existence begins with the very vulnerability towards the others. I can't escape this relationship since the grounds apart. I don't have an account for Butler 1. The I can't tell the story of its own emergence without the very witness to a state in which one could have been present or prior to one's day. I'm the story of my origin. In several ways, but the story can establish my accountability. There are several ways in which the accountability part becomes undermined. There's a condition for which I can point to. We can't erase the past. There's the history for which I have no recollection. My account of myself is partial. For how to definitive story can explain why I have immersive way my efforts of reconstruction. I was to kind of revision. There's that in me for which I can give no account. Second, the precarious exposure of the pre-subject to the other begins with language. After the beginning, culture to language, we can develop and interpret the meaning and become aware of the existence of our body. A body without an agent experiences the world, but it's impossible. But is it aware of the meaning of it? Once described in language, experiences perceptual of the body without an agent becomes impossible. There too. Length sustains the body by being interpolated with the terms of language existence. The body becomes first becomes possible. Longest imagined impossible scene. The body has a yet conventional definition and addresses in the character's body. Constitutes the address constitutes the being with possible circular recognition. And third, any judgment we take as agents is given price that norms are the understanding of our own. But 3, the self is dependent upon the other, but with the other horizon which the other recognizes. This question limits the other recognizing covers recognition of the norms that govern recognizability. Norms to introduce this orientation. If I understand myself conferring recognition, only then I take the recognition comes to me. The moment that I realize terms I confer recognition on my aloneness to a norm so most expected to the norm and agency the use systems identity fluid, and the subject doesn't have jurisdiction over his own capacity, so it can't ignore obligations from precarious assistance. They ground the subject in ways that can't be repossessed and give the account of oneself. But 4, if the subject is opaque, it's not licensed to do what it wants or ignore its relations by virtue of its relations. If it's opaque to itself, its relations are the others that ethic venue for ethical responsibility, then it may fall. It's precisely by virtue of the subject's capacity to itself that it sustains its most important bonds, outweighs. It's not sufficiently binding upon agents. Simply no morals. The ethical theorem is provided reason why agents care about being moral. Butler explains that our theory is binding in virtue of not having control over precarious history. And the standard is consistency, the vulnerability, impact calc. 1, consequences are independent because they can't calculate the future because they're infinite possibilities. So it always feels if I intend to frame someone as grievable and then there's an intervening action or structure that makes them ungrievable, then there's no reason why I should be held culpable because my intentions are that to be grievable. The second, pragmatic calculations like you shall fail to give life meaning or presume an ontological establishment. This is the efforts of Butler 5. Non-violence is to be a light intervention of her opposed the norms that differentiate between lives that count as grievable. Only the condition of lives are grievable is called the non-violence avoided complicity, the egalitarianism of even such info that follows from the calculation, the consequences of non-violence satisfaction ontology that's prior to any calculation precarious is that the effect of the condition reigning strategy non-violence is derived from the apprehension of the equality in the midst of the precarious and preferred reversibility. Norms are social and reversible. Anytime someone is oppressed, they're being recognized. Given the structure of recognition are fluid, these positions are reversible and you can't know it's the thought Butler 6. And being called an interesting one is defined by being named one is given a combustibility of social existence in the temporal life of flight that exceeds prior purposes and to address produce an unexpected response to be addressed is interpolated in the offensive call inaugurating subject who comes to use language to counter. And I defend that resolved wealthy nations not to provide developmental assistance to other nations in the form of humanitarian assistance. I'm willing to spec further in CX Delaney 14. Not only is about humanitarian aid which assembled to dispense the response to catastrophes and disasters. Unpredictable catastrophic events are expected, unexpected, and warranted fast amount of help and support from outside forces. Emergency aid is important when recovering from a disaster and have positive econ when employing citizens to participate in the recovery process. Humanitarian aid is a helpful solution to stabilize the situation and help move people from danger. The solutions only short-term relief and assistance are almost by definition short-term. And 1 point is natural disasters. With the avid exponential increase in the natural disasters of all kinds, our mutual vulnerability in this other is exposed to the apathy and natural disasters turns to be the factor of arts' national boundaries. Bell 12. Natural disasters are more frequent disrupted than any time the number of people vulnerable to them is risen by 50k to 60k per decade. People living in the path of their own destruction. There'd be no escape. Disasters and connect people are more vulnerable than they used to be. And today's response to natural disasters on a global scale is miserably insufficient. We must use humanitarian aid to recognize dependency we could all have on each other that these countries have as they are too poor to protect themselves in the way that wealthy nations could afford to do. 7. Humanitarian financing has become based on the scale and scope of natural disasters. This is a lack of progress. This is due to the constraint and resources, but also to a set of perverse incentives that work against reducing vulnerability to natural hazards. Wealthy countries build mechanisms to protect their citizens. These standards need to be applied to people too poor to protect themselves. The international community can't afford to be complacent about these issues any longer. Humanity is at risk. 2 point is famine. Lots of people are dying from famine. Clear 17. Not since World War II, more people have been at risk of disease and starvation. This moment, 20 million people are likely to die without coordinating international action. People will starve and die. 7.3 million are at risk in Yemen, 5.1 million at risk in Nigeria, 5 million in South Sudan, and 2.9 million in Somalia. Humanitarians can still help the worst case scenario, and famine and other humanitarian crises are ignored and continually pushed to the side of the marks of this ungrievable. The vulnerability outweighs this extremely primordial. Butlerly and Shepard 1. Loud emergency downside, silent emergency kills millions without notice. Unreleased starvation, brutal conflict, the breath out of the food shortages and hunger. Loud emergencies gain our attention. Loud in the media and track large amounts of donations of emergency or relief aid to the overwhelmed silent emergencies that occur globally every day. Millions die and family days continue. We can ignore them in peril. Silent emergency killed and we continue killing every week without publicity in forgotten corners. And the state of being rendered ungrievable is more than just being oppressed. Non-grievability separates death from having any impact on social relationship with justice agency is something outside of precariousness. Grievability is necessary to apprehend the vulnerability of our ontology. Butler 7. Finitude singularizes death. Precariousness underscores radical sustainability is something we're born with. I think precariousness is coexistence with the worth of living being may die as a society cares who may live under conditions in which the loss matters is the value of life. Appear grievability is presupposition for the life that matters. This will be a life that will live with a grievable life, which means that a life can be regarded as a life and be sustained, and taking action is necessary. Remaining silent is no longer an option. Butlerly and Shepard 2. To continue this quote honors hunger and poverty as unacceptable conditions. Time has come to agree that it's intolerable for 29K to die every day from preventable causes. We have the knowledge of the means we need to take action and remain silent now. Underview. The atmosphere. When I told you what the app was before the around 30 minutes, there's no research written since you knew the app was disclosed. Second, solvable status means it's predictable in the literature. 3, Lincoln impact turn ground. You can still engage in the app and topical proper lies. It's still quality. It's since there's transit against humanitarian aid, and you'll see the app creates dependency. But first, dependency is inherently consequential. So predictive pragmatic analysis shows that. Second, humanitarian aid is short-term and isn't mutually exclusive with other forms of development assistance. It means that if there's dependencies due to a different form of assistance, or B, there's literally no other assistance going on or help, which means not doing the app lets them die. And you'll say colonialism, but there's an asymmetrical power relation between the wealthy and the other. That's an imbalance of power. We can ignore this asymmetry because of abstraction.
After extracts from it.
Yep.
Did you cut any cards?
What?
Did you cut any cards?
No.
Okay, ready?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that analytic in the framework, like somewhere after like the third Butler card. It says identity is fluid. How did you draw this conclusion, and what is the impact?
Yeah, so Butler 3 talks about how like the self is dependent upon the other, and we submit to norms that continue to like be interpolated and have different like uses within it. So Butler says that identity is fluid. That was just like a lot of people don't understand.
So what is the impact of this? Does that mean that
verbatim.
someone can unbecome like brown or black? Like
No.
I understand that like sort of those are social constructs, but what is the impact to this? If
So
people are
like what
just
it means to be
constructed
black
as
can
certain
change. What it
racialized?
means to be brown can change. Like those words can change in that identifier, i.e. like black used to just be something that was like a drop of it, but now it seems to be like phenotypical in today's society. Those are like completely different. It used to be like just from Africa, things like that, but now there are different
Why does us sort
definitions
of
what it
like
means to be black.
reconciling with the other and being vulnerable
Sorry, I
somehow?
didn't hear you because you interrupted me.
How does us reconciling with the other and being vulnerable allow us to sort of understand racialized bodies? Like, what's an example of us doing something that's consistent with the app framework that has done this?
Yeah, so I feel like when we recognize grievability, it will, or like stop ungrievability, that will recognize things. So we give the example of silent emergencies and like what's happening in Yemen, in Nigeria, South Sudan, and Somalia. All of those tend to be racialized countries. They're dying silently. 29,000 people are dying every day in those countries.
Okay.
So when we make that no longer like the distinction between loud emergencies and silent emergencies, and all humanitarian crises get assistance, that marks them as grievable, as something that we could do.
I guess that
help.
like segues into my next question. What does the plan do?
So the plan gives humanitarian assistance. That's things like money that's helping them with their infrastructure, i.e. like Harvey stopped
So
interstate.
sort of the spike you read at the bottom of the case is like this is short-term assistance. What exact? Like I want you to specify exactly like how the app is implemented and how that's sort of like distinct that from like normal developmental assistance.
Okay, so I think that normal developmental assistance includes humanitarian assistance. It's just a part of it, i.e. like
So
you
it's
could do
so
military
what?
assistance.
So is it just short-term assistance for particular disasters? Like I don't understand what this short-term.
Yeah, so
is.
developmental assistance, some of it includes like a country going in and staying within their government for like years and years and years, whereas humanitarian assistance, like once the humanitarian crisis is no longer something that has an impact, then they're gone.
Okay, so I guess the question then is, famine is something that happens continually because of like a lack of resources and sort of exploitation. At what point does the UN or whatever decide that African countries are like fine and leave?
Okay, so famine right now can be stopped. It's through things like war and through like refugee crisis and things like that, in which that it causes. There's things in like ignoring of poverty because bodies are like seen as ungrievable.
Do you define
in
an
the first
increase
place.
in development assistance?
Yeah.
Okay. No problem. We'll send it.
Just before that, so in the 1AR, I won't be able to fool you if you're not much clearer on tags and analytics.
Okay.
And I'm not going to try like extra hard. I'll say clear. I just had the speech start. I'll say clear like once. But you have to be much clearer.
All right.
It's.
What's the order?
One off, please. Order in case will be framework advantages of order. Is everyone good? Okay. Will isolate the links to the affirmative one, the relationship between Europe and Africa is analogous to the horseback rider, and the horse African nations are paternalized, exploited, and forced into aid agreements that destroy their economy and result in neo-colonialism. Duncan, 12, the continent industry in Mali accounts for 50% of the country's income. Mali's president please of development cooperation. The programs are imposed upon us by trying to make us believe that they were ours. There's a complicated difficulty in planning us. He does not consider programs launched to be expression of his country's paternalism is given to the national cottage industry. Recommendation to trap this help is not help because experts are involved are unfamiliar with local circumstances of the Malian population. The denial of knowledge based on power differential is a relevant issue. Her power based on economic superiority denial of such as agents within the process of development. The asymmetric power relation makes development aid become a politics between the horse rider and the horse African countries. Lisbon, the recipient are World Bank and the U.S. are pressure Mali to compete with subsidized foreign products. The U.S. and Europe are able to enforce their interests in considered terms of trade, while Africans do not have an audible voice in countries refusing to agree to a program often threatened with suspension of it is potentially can lower protection and decrease unemployment and regression of educational system. And African governments are highly vulnerable. Blackmail euphemism of partnership blows the actual power to fight Africa is objectified and subject to foreigners in search of needing. Second, the African model of development is treating every country as equal and giving charity aid instead of recognizing particular injustices within particular communities. Gallo 10. Development aid continues to play into risky paradise with Europe's at top and Africa's at the bottom, whom we should take pity on to save this paternalism is raised in the reasons colonial structures that advocated for development cannot be achieved without questioning the assumption that what works in one place will work everywhere. For not a country, Europe's wealth was direct result of the plunder of the colonies. But we hear a European nation declared he must come to Asia undeveloped world of poverty. People living in poverty are not just passive beneficiaries of aid rather than advocate daily circumstances make decisions based on resources available. Their development aid should be more than a project designed to facilitate the capitalist world system so that they may continue to be exploited by economic powers. 3. Butler, the notion of recognition raised by colonial thought coloniality has structured the world in a way that makes the marketplace beg for recognition and understanding from colonized, but it's like a hamster on the wheel. Butler's pursuit reifies the same colonial divide. Coulthard, 09. Colonial has been a transition from the Castillo that starts the domination from the coloniality of governmentality. The worst of the limited limits of freedom affected by state recognition and accommodation. Colonial rulers have reproduced by force and maintenance of the settler had required the protection of a colonized subject, able to the protection of the specific modes of colonial thought desire, and behavior that colonized the types of practices and subject positions that are required for the continued domination. Recognition is not posited as a source of freedom and dignity for the colonized, but rather a field of power through which colonial relations are produced and maintained in collapse of neo-colonial system is inevitable. It's just a question of transition. Development causes poverty, increases the wealth gap, and results in endless nuclear war. Nukarama 10. Neo-colonialism represents imperialism with the most dangerous colonial control is actually through economic peace and exploitation rather than development. Investment increases the gap between the rich and the poor. The struggle against neo-colonialism prevents financial power to develop. Countries can use to impoverish the less developed, and certainty of mutual massive structure prevents the great power blocks from threatening each other. Military conflicts become confined to limited wars. For these neo-colonialism is a vertical multiplication of multiple similar wars can only have one, and nuclear conflict internal contradiction making certain that it cannot endure a permanent world. That policy and inevitable collapse will destroy the social system, and the alternative is a deconstruction of the slave-master relationship, only exposing current power structure. Can we start to imagine new possibilities through collective action? Duncan 12. A deconstructed approach towards hegemonic grammar of wealth inherent additional postcolonial readings of imperialism to encompass cultural, political exchanges. The 1 and C framework. Their epistemic injustice of colonialism outweighs it, prevents thinking of alternatives, and denies the colonized their self-worth, forcing people to think in a certain way, grounds all other forms of violence, bar Gava. 13. With some colonization of intellectual culture, the focus must remain on the concepts of representation, neither economic nor political control, of sustained through prevents the belief in the cultural superiority of colonized land, and the goods of the colonized have also shaped the cultural minds. Injustice occurs when there's a basic forms of a group are altered by powerful dominant groups, and a damage capacity results in a persistent failure to think for oneself. Although the framework is super racist, it assumes that people can change sort of the way that they recognize other people based on interacting with them. That is empirically not true. They've had development aid for so freaking long, but no one understands Africans and still treats them as subhumans, which proves that their framework is just trying to paper over certain inequalities while ignoring the root causes, which only our framework can explain. Top level argument that this card will answer all their internal links. Medicine at 40 years of development aid revealed that it's not effective. Previous studies are subject to journal pressures and goodness bias that are disincentivize them from publishing negative results, but fail to account for crowding out injustices and effects that hinders aid effectiveness, which means that their epistemology for their studies are bad. Decologus and podium. 9. Institution interest caused those financed by aid prior interest caused bias and loyalty with the organization, career pressures on employees, selection of selected organization employees, researchers are reluctant to publish negative results. If too many positive results are reported, the search will become way better. British researchers receive absent funding. Other grants, at least 35% of researchers are working in the aid industry. The true proportion is likely to be higher. Meta-analysis can include moderator variables for both other characteristics for their publication outlet, and both types are significant. Trends of these results are no economic significance. Are not different. Zero reluctance of to publish negative results are so reported. Research is upwardly biased and response to theoretically well-founded, and control variables are found at a zero absolute effectiveness in the positive aid growth of the effective transfer is compensated. Decrease in growth rates and aid would be less of an advantage in the long run, and then the transfer inevitably leads to international competitiveness, reduces causes losses in the economy and outside booming aid structure. Research fails to get a for decades. Our meta-analysis found no evidence of aid effectiveness, even though 74% of published aid growth effects were positive. Cut the card there now on disaster humanitarian and disaster responses. Objective of whiteness, white certain countries response teams rely on disempowering and repugnant stereotypes to other people. Affirmative in the field of positiveness and aid the fallen chips in countries they know nothing about. Zakaria 15. Disaster relief in Haiti pointed out the colonial stereotypes in the 80s first occupied many of the aid workers in Haiti did not speak French. They now attend community meetings or had no idea what was being assessed. So Park Commander came out and added $140,000 a year where the organization hired locals that were elected to lower positions where the red cross aligns with USAID. To consider development as a means of promoting youth foreign policy objectives is invisible one. Cut the card after invisible.
Will you send me doc?
Yep. Oh, I think I forgot to delete a card, but it's the second card in the framework section.
Okay. The one that like has the like blank, like a word / blank.
It just whatever the second card in the framework section is. It's like the
Participation / empowerment.
Yes.
That was it. Cool. Awesome. Everyone good? You make this argument that that affirmative framework is racist because like development aid has still happened for so long and we still view people as subhuman. Why does that mean the affirmative framework is racist?
So our argument is that sort of politics of recognition and being like, oh, when white people talk to brown people, they're like, it sucks to be a brown person. We understand their pain. We understand their identity and who they are and why that's bad. Our argument is that that is racist because that obviously isn't true. A lot of our colonialism first arguments make the similar claim, like the representations arguments that
who says that wealthy nations are just white nations?
So our argument is that the majority of development assistance that's given is given by wealthy white nations.
Where's that warrant? Where's that?
All of the cards that we read are about how sort of wealthy correlates with whiteness. So the Gallo card is pretty good on this question.
Okay. Let's go to the links.
Even so, no brown or black nation is giving a significant amount of developmental aid. That's a pretty ridiculous argument.
Okay, on Butler, or on the Cold Hard 9 evidence, you say that, like, the notion of recognition is colonial thought. Is that just the reiteration that you, like, the first question I asked, that, like, development aid has been there for forever and we still...
Well, it's a different warrant than what I said on case.
Okay, what's the warrant?
So this argument is about how sort of whiteness permeates sort of in neo-colonialism by telling brown people that they can be recognized and that their ultimate goal is to be assimilated and understood by other people, but it's like a hamster on a wheel where they're never quite understood, and white people keep moving the bar further and further away. They're like, oh yeah, we kind of get why it sucks to be poor, but like, why does it suck to be like not on welfare? Or they keep moving the bar further and further, so they can never truly understand or be a part. Coloniality should have a part in our discussions, and we should look at the representations.
So that's just like an impact to my framework, right?
No, we
Okay,
read a completely different role of the ballot sort of thing. It's the Jones-04 card, interrogating the representation of development policy as a prior question, shapes reality and empirics proof. Then we read the Bargava 13 card that says that injustices from colonialism outweigh, so you should look at
How can I link
those.
under your framing then?
You should interrogate the representations of the 1AC and prove that those are good and prove that you are not colonialist.
Okay, what does the alternative do?
What do you mean by that?
Like, how do we deconstruct the slave-master relationship?
So the alternative is twofold. First, it's sort of like something you do in this round. It's a pedagogical orientation towards being like, no, we should not reinscribe brown and black bodies into systems of domination. Rather, we should analyze the way that those power structures are created by coloniality and sort of reject and analyze why those are bad. The second is that it's a sort of form of collective action that brown and black bodies can take against colonialism, so like collective movements.
Okay. Starting back. She's 149.
New doc?
What?
New doc?
No. Is everyone ready? It's going to be Alf, then K.
Order on the app.
Top down.
Okay.
We all good? Kelly's silent. Okay.
First on framework, just saying that X is a prior question doesn't mean that it's an actual framework. It's just an impact calculus, i.e. what we should look to under my framework, which just means that you should just assume the affirmative framework, but even if you don't buy that, you should still buy my framework. Example or truth says our actions and judgments are based on norms that never are known. In interaction with the individual, there's always some opaqueness or unknown about the individual that we cannot fully know. Then extend Butler 3, existence begins with bare vulnerability. It is impossible to give an account of oneself without mentioning the other, which is at least partially opaque in existence, and since relationships with the others are always changing, this means that identity is fluid. If identity is fluid, then any static starting point like colonialism starts from the assumption of an impossible universal relationship, even if that universal relationship is inherently flawed. Also, any starting point of liberation treats the subject as singular, is independent of the other, and ultimately fails because we always have these relationships that you don't account for. Then extend Butler 4 and the standard of consistency with vulnerability of agency. Vulnerability prescribes a normative obligation since subjects' relations to others prescribe ethical responsibility and opaqueness, meaning the subject is obligated to act based on this precariousness. This is also binding, which means this is a reason to why the affirmative case comes before the negative case. Also, they have conceded that grievability is the impact that comes first. That was Butler 6. That's the Butler 6 evidence, which gives the example about how, or no, it's actually Butler 7. That's Butler 7, which gives the example how norms are social and reversible. No, that's Butler 7. Sorry. It talks about grievability as a precondition for precariousness, since in order for a life to matter, a vulnerable relationship between individuals to be recognized, the loss of life must matter, or the social relationship isn't acknowledged. This is something that means that we control the internal linking toward accessing the K, because grievability is something that the slave-master relationship inherently tries to dominate, which means if we stop grievability or ungrievability from happening, that means that we can also help solve with the alternative. Also, help solve with the alternative. You get the Kalkani 5 evidence, which talks about the American Red Cross, but first of all, there's no reason why we're going to be the American Red Cross. We're talking about humanitarian system, which isn't just the Red Cross. For example, when Harvey happened, American Red Cross got like no one coming to them. Also now onto the also you say that epistemic injustice of colonialism will always comes first, but epistemic injustice of colonialism doesn't recognize that the norms are fluid. That's the Butler 6 evidence, which gives the example about how norms are social and reversible for language. For example, like people call me queer, but I can use the word queer as a site of empowerment for myself through recognition, i.e. you calling me queer, and a space with that norm. I'm able to invert that space's social interpretation, which means even if there's some dependency coming from the affirmative or some sort of colonialism impact, they can use that identification that the structure of colonialism has given them in order to invert that structure. You say that it is racist because there's development aid has been allowed for so long, but obviously we are not typical development aid because it is something that is short-term. That's a Delaney 14 evidence, which also delinks us from the majority of the critique, because it's talking about people going into governments and staying there, but that's not what we're doing. We're just making sure that they're being able to live. The Clear 17 evidence shows that there are 20 million people dying from famine right now. Then the Butlerly and Shepard 1 evidence shows that famine and other humanitarian crises are ignored and continually pushed to the side, which marks them as ungrievable. This vulnerability outweighs as something that is extremely primordial to the basis of agents. And then the Butlerly and Shepard 2 evidence is that action is necessary. You do nothing to help solve these people who are literally dying on the streets, and we do not care about it in the Western and wealthy nation world, which means that is a reason as to why it is try or die for the affirmative, to try to get unforgivability to stop, and we recognize the grievability of other agents. Down to the critique. First, there's no link because it's short-term, which means it's not going to stay for long enough for it to be colonial or for that recognition to be able to inscribe on other people. Second, scroll links as well, which means that the strength of the link is also terrible. You should err out from this impact. Also means that the impact is going to be non-unique. And now onto the alternative. First, perm, do both. You can deconstruct the slave-master relationship as well as doing the affirmative. There's no reasons to why they're mutually exclusive. Also, you talk about in-ground pedagogy, but that does nothing if we abstract away from what's currently going on in society, which is a reason as to why you should look to the affirmative first. Now, you make this argument that the bar is continually going to be pushed for people, but we don't give them the chance to, since it's short-term, and we also are not defining what it means to do it. We're just making sure that they have food and making sure that they can live in order for them to do it, which also means we control the internal link, and that's a net benefit to the perm because they'll be able to live and access it.
4 minutes. overview sort of solvency card, then the framework debate, then it'll go to the critique.
Okay, wait, so F?
At the like overview solvency card, then the framework debate, then the critique. There was a lot of sort of like line by line stuff that interacted with the critique on the 1AC. I'll try to be clear, but I'm going to address them on the K. Everyone good? Big mistake on the app. They conceded that the app does nothing because development assistance is not effective. They conceded two independent arguments, which was the overview argument we made on the case. First is that previous studies are subject to journal pressure, and goodness by that didn't incentivize them for publishing negative results, which was the epistemology or expert of all the solvency arguments they use are bad because the majority of people who write about development assistance are people who are paid off by the industry, have connections to the industry, or they're threatened into not publishing bad results about the effectiveness of the aid. The second argument is that the second argument is sort of empirical, that it just has not resulted in anything. It's generally ineffective and hasn't actually addressed poverty within these nations, but also hasn't shown to have any sort of measurable effect on people within those areas, which takes out all of their solvency arguments. Everything they went for in all of the overview and like every piece of offense they went for, and the last page were like, oh, we solved famine and things like that, but they've conceded that the app has literally almost zero probability of solving any of these arguments, and you should just vote negative on presumption. But you should just vote negative on presumption. Now, the framework debate, two reasons you vote neg on framework. One, they consider that coloniality is a prior ethical question. She said at the top that colonialism could just be a weighing mechanism under her framing, but that literally means that the colonialism comes first. She considered that it's a sort of it's an amalgamation of different power structures that precludes people's ability to have a subject formation in the first place because they're not considered humans in a world of coloniality, which comes first to being able to sort of have recognition or have subjecthood in the first place, which takes out her framework. The second argument is the recognition bad argument. There are two warrants. First is that it's impossible why people construct certain bodies as the other on purpose because they don't want to understand them. It's empirically proven that they can't understand the other just by talking to them. For example, if everyone were just to be like, oh yeah, we can understand Africa now because we know that they're poor, then there would be no such thing as non-grievability in this world because people know that it's for people of color because they can never truly be recognized by white people or certain people in power and structures of domination because they're just like, oh, we can recognize you if you do X, or we can recognize you if you do Y, but they will just keep moving the bar. For example, they're like, oh, we understand poverty, but we just don't understand why you need a living wage, or something like that. They keep moving the bar, which means that they can never truly understand those people, which is a reason why affirmation should come first. You should examine the representations of colonialism of the 1AC first. They conceded that it comparatively shapes how policies are how those policies are implemented, which is a prior question logically. It also means that the plan never passes, so we should just analyze how we talk about problems in the here and now, or else we lose those bad assumptions with us, which means that we outweigh us of the pedagogical outlet of debate, which is a unique benefit to our framework, and you should evaluate it. The critique. Our impact turns and outweighs the case. Colonialism is unsustainable. It infiltrates every aspect of life and reinforces power structures that makes violence inevitable, which has left Africa rife with genocide, torture, and poverty. It also causes extinction because we view people as lesser than us. It allows us to justify endless violence and then never protecting national interests, which means that we outweigh because it's a prior ethical question to sort of have people in the first place. It also turns case they're two independent arguments. She went for the famine argument, but the Molly card interacts with this really well. It's the first card in the critique, and it talks about the way that they go into certain countries and restructure the way that their sort of like local economies work in a way that is westernized and neoliberal, which doesn't fit the sort of particularities of those countries, and it actually just destroys those industries because they don't understand how the environment works in those places, and they don't understand how the economy works and don't work with local populations to get their input. The Mali cotton industry was 50% of Mali's economy, but it was completely destroyed after developmental aid programs went in and tried helping them out, which is an empirical example of how they don't understand how sort of agriculture works in Western nation, which independently turns and also outweighs on empirical examples. You cannot name a single time in which development assistance has actually been effective in solving any of her advantages, so you should prefer the specificity to the negative. Her only argument against this is, oh, hashtag not of development assistance, but given that she didn't specify what would be different about current development assistance, and in crossing she was just like, oh, we just increased the amount of money to current programs, you should hold them accountable for these two arguments. Now, the disasters argument, she didn't go for this, but also the disaster argument is independently true. They send in people like the Red Cross and USAID, and they do not understand sort of the local communities, and they don't listen to their perspectives on issues, so they'll put in people who literally cannot speak the language of those islands or of those countries, and they will not attend sort of community meetings which tell them what they need to do to help out people in those areas, and they will just pay bureaucrats from Western nations and import workers into those places instead of using local people because they just want to have control over those areas, which is just reifying neocolonialism because they literally control these people's lives in their hands, and it means that it's ineffective aid also because they never address the local particular problems, which was the Haiti example on the case page. Now, there are multiple. Those are two conceded links and prove that both are disadvantages to the permutation. Any instance of development aid just wrecks our ability to be able to have collective movements against coloniality. Now, independent. Second link, or the third link we'll go for is this paternalism argument that wealthy countries talk down to Africa and other countries. They view them as not as people but as objects to be exploited. They don't listen to local input and never address the most pressing concerns. African nations are our partners in the process, but people who can be controlled, which means that independently the one is just a notion of control for these people. Now, the line by line, you say no link because it's the short term. All of our arguments are still applicable because they have to go in for multiple years to go and do what the one is talking about. And also, we read cards that are specific to what your advantages are about. You say 12 links too, so it's not unique, but our argument is that you increase it, so obviously there's a link differential, but also your epistemology and sort of your representation of, oh, we have to help out those poor non-Western nations, but use these terrible means are still bad. You say short-term benefit because you're able to solve food. You concede that you don't solve your advantage, but also the critique independently links this, and only we can solve the root cause of the advantages anyway, which means that impact is inevitable. You say prone to both, there's no mutual exclusivity, and that the alternative is abstract, but we say that we do collective action, and that fiat isn't a question in this round, so it's not like a reason to vote us down.
I have 149 remaining. 149. Cool. Taking now. Did y'all see if you walked out or just like standing outside the hallway?
I can after.
Yeah. AFK fell in here. Everyone good? Lawrence?
Game over on the AF. You have no real framework. You just have a, quote, prior ethical question. You say people need to be viewed as people first, and you need to deconstruct colonial domination first. But Butler 7 talks about Greekability, and if we don't care if a life is lost, we come first. And if you're viewed as people but still aren't cared about, then there's no reason as to why you're actually going to do anything. But obviously, that's obviously worse than caring for something that's viewed as less than someone. As long as we still care for them, it doesn't matter whether or not the structure actually disadvantages them. But even then, you can still retake that system. That was the Butler 6 which just goes conceded in the last speech, which says that you can take that structure in which you are in and you are recognized and you're able to reinvert it. Even if the bars continually push hard further and further, you can still reinvert that, i.e. the word queer can be pushed further and further into what it means or what it means to actually do, but you can still reinvert that space and there's still some sort of recognition of the body, whether or not you're on the top or the bottom of the hierarchy, which means that you can still use that. Also, you accept Butler 2, which says that our actions and our judgments are based upon norms that are never our own. It's an interaction with the other individual that shows there's some opaqueness or unknown that the individual cannot fully know. Then extend Butler 3 that says existence begins with bare vulnerability. It's impossible to give an account of oneself without mentioning the other, which is at least partially opaque, but since relationships with others are always changing. This means identity is fluid, which goes conceded out of the 2, and which means it is also conceded the implications, which says if identity is fluid, then the aesthetic starting point, like deconstructing coloniality in an epistemic way, starts with the assumption of a possible universal relationship, even if that universal relationship has an inherent hierarchy. And then the second implication was that any static starting point of liberation treats the subject as singular, i.e. of one singular body, of what the slave means or what the master means, but independent of the other, and ultimately fails when there are definitely heterogeneous, and you just try to homogenize it, which means that you are not looking to the intricacies of what each individual is looking at. And now onto the contention level. You extended the Douglas and Panda 9 evidence, but in the 1 and C, it is definitely saying that there hinders effectiveness. It's not to say 0% probability of doing anything. It just says that it's not as good as it may seem. So you just should subtract maybe 2 points from the affirmative. There's no reason why you shouldn't look at the affirmative at all. We say that 20 million people are dying due to famine. That was clear 17. 20 million people is definitely enough so that we should at least try to do something, especially when the negative is literally not doing anything. It's just sitting here in a White Castle just talking about stuff, but that isn't really doing anything. There are people that are dying within Yemen and Somalia and South Sudan. Society could care less since it doesn't sell in the media. That was Butler and Shepard 1, which says let people divide into forgotten quarters and become agreeable. This is the worst impact, which is conceded. That was Butler 7. It's the worst form. It's worse than oppression because it says that your life doesn't even matter and we don't care about it. Now, on to the critique. On the perm, you can extend perm to death. You say that links are to the perm, but we have the benefit of giving you people in order to access this. You do not get any solvency from the alternative. If you don't have any people to do it, you subtract 20 million people from the affirmative, from the alternative, which is that they literally have no social base to have any sort of do it. Also, we said that we are the key to solving, and you talk about this in-round pedagogy, but your in-round pedagogy doesn't do things. So you talk about how we're going into governments and changing the structure, but that's not true. You said we stay for years, but that's not true. It's just getting water out and getting food. There's no reason why it lasts that long.
Did you dress like Travis again?
Yeah. My new tournament is coming.
All right, it's a good debate. The decision is a 3-0 for the negative from Harvard-Westlake. I can go first. All right. I think the 2AR spends a lot of time on these kind of framing all the Butler stuff versus colonialism. I end up thinking that doesn't actually matter as much as I think the 2AR needs it to, because I don't think you end up winning a couple of important issues. These are the issues at the top of the case, which are essentially that affirming doesn't do anything. So even if you win that 100% only care about Butler, don't care anything about colonialism, she's winning that merely recognizing other people doesn't do anything, and that development assistance as a historical project has not been effective at doing anything to remedy the conditions of these countries, and has not produced any sort of recognition.
Can you speak up a little bit?
And has not produced any sort
Sorry,
of
I just
recognition
have
of
hearing
viewability. So I think she wins with the app doesn't do anything. I don't have good arguments against I don't have any response to the first argument that she makes in the 2R, which is that aid, or that just kind of talking to people doesn't do anything, that mere recognition does anything. And I don't have the only response I have in the 1AR to this card that she reads about why development assistance is not effective is just that you're a different type of aid, that you're short term. I'm not sure how this escapes the argument that she's reading. So like there's not like an argument for evidence that clearly tells me that it's long term. There's no differentiation really done between what you're doing and what the evidence speaks to. So I think she's winning that affirming does nothing. Therefore, a risk neg offense is it's easy for me to vote on either the turn or the critique, because your only access to your only in-way on the critique is the permutation, but she's winning that the app doesn't do anything, and she's also, I think, wins a substantial disadvantage to the term from the links. So I think if she's winning these arguments at the top, the app doesn't do anything, then it's hard for me to piece together an app dialogue.
So I'll go next. I agree. I don't think you ever like answer critique at all. The only thing we have is just like link turn that you think is like the framework turns the K, because you're like readability is really that's all this, but the framework isn't your app. So I don't understand why you spend so much time. Like readability is important. You should be like, yeah, cool, the colonialism great. I fixed it. I stopped it. I saw the impact to it. Whatever. The links on this are not real great. But you don't answer. You're just like, no link, no break, no Coach used to joke about that, but you're like, no link, no break, no impact. And then you're like, firm. She doesn't like actually talk about the links and make this differentiation between short-term and long-term aid. I just don't think, I think the K has a great link argument, but I don't think you answer the impact level. And I don't think the 2R answers the links at all. And I don't think that you are doing a great job of showing me that aid has ever been effective. I think like one example would be like sufficient to like, it's helped in this really good place. And then I think the debate is a lot closer. But absent answering the K, I think you just don't have really anything on offense. Also, if we've been giving money to people, they don't like black people. So,
yeah. That doesn't do much. I don't think the links make that much sense, but at least they're explained very minimally. This argument about how the app potentially results in people going into local economies and just sort of messing them up, I think turns the case. And like there is an argument about how, and you're like, best 2AR out is just like 20 million people die, let's fix it. And like the alternative probably does do something to fix that, because it's just like movements now, local economies do solve, you interrupt those movements, at least pushes back on that framing, and that and the fact that you don't really do anything via the concession of the EV. You say like, lower me 2 points, but like I read the EV, it's like lower you down to like less than 1%. So